Hey there, Alex here. The Nexus 6 is more than 2 years old now. It can almost be considered an antique in the smartphone industry, but this is a phone that Google is still currently updating, and one of the few devices that is actually running the latest version of Android. So clearly, Google thinks that this is still a relevant phone today. So let's see if the Nexus 6 is still worth considering. The Nexus 6 was first announced on 15th of October 2014. It was codenamed Shamu, which is the name of a killer whale. It was quite literally a whale of a phone considering its 5.9-inch display. This is a really big phone. The design of the phone was clearly inspired by Motorola's second generation Moto X, just bigger in size. It's a design that has aged quite well, as it still looks pretty attractive by today's standard. The phone is surrounded by a metal frame with a curved plastic back to help make it easier to hold in the hand, but this is definitely a phone that you use two-handed. The Nexus 6 was one of the first few devices in the market to use a Quad HD AMOLED screen. While the quality of the display might not look as nice as newer generation displays in terms of the viewing angles or the outdoor visibility, the high resolution and the inky blacks from the AMOLED screen makes it a really enjoyable experience still. Then there are these front-firing stereo speakers on the phone, which still sounds better than a lot of modern smartphones in the market. In terms of media consumption, when you look at the Quad HD screen and the stereo speakers, the Nexus 6 can still stand toe-to-toe with newer phones in the market. What the Nexus 6 can't compete in would be its hardware. While the 32-bit Snapdragon 801 processor with 3GB of RAM is still relatively speedy in day-to-day usage, playing graphically intensive games does take its toll on the phone. It's still playable, but just don't expect consistent frame rates or fast loading times. I am not much of a gamer, so the most outdated aspect of the phone to me is actually the lack of the fingerprint sensor. I've been so spoiled by how easy it is to unlock a phone with my fingerprint that even a 4-digit PIN seems like a hassle now. There is something that wasn't a hassle going back to the Nexus 6, and that's the Microusb port. It may sound a bit backwards of me to say this, since USB Type-C is clearly the future, but it's nice to be able to use a lot of my existing cables and chargers just lying around. And the charging speed of the phone is actually still able to keep up with most modern phones with Motorola's turbocharging. This comes in quite handy as battery life is something that the Nexus 6 can't really compete with most modern smartphones. With only a 3220 mAh battery pack, the Nexus 6 can last me a day of moderate use, but just barely. The enhancements to battery efficiency with Android Nougat does help a little, especially with the standby time, but if you have an older Nexus 6 like I do, it's not gonna make much of a difference with the older battery. The camera is another feature that hasn't aged too well with the Nexus 6, not that it was great to begin with. The 13-megapixel rear camera takes decent images in good lighting conditions, and it comes with optical image stabilization and an aperture of 2.0. However, it quickly falls apart in dimmer lighting conditions. A quick tip to get better images out of the camera would be to use the Hdr Plus mode. It takes a little longer to process the images, but does improve the quality by a noticeable amount. For example, this is without Hdr Plus. This is with Hdr Plus. You do get a lot more artifacts in the image, but it's better than not seeing anything in the shot at all. The front camera is also just 2 megapixel, which isn't really worth mentioning. In short, if you're not too concerned with camera quality, this is a decent enough camera. The saving grace of the Nexus 6 comes in the form of software. Being a Nexus device, it runs a stock version of Android straight from Google, meaning it is as light as it gets when it comes to software. Performance is fast and snappy, and while it's not quite as smooth as the Google Pixel, it's still surprising how well the phone handles the latest software. By latest, I mean Android 7.1.1 Nougat. As of now, the list of Android smartphones running 7.1.1 is pretty much limited to mostly Nexus and Pixel devices. And with Android Nougat, we also get the newer under-the-hood enhancements like better standby battery life, the Vulkan API support for better gaming experience, quick reply from the notification tray, more emojis, and of course, better security. On the more user-facing side of features, there are a few really useful features that I really like split screen multitasking, so I can watch YouTube videos and surf the web at the same time. There's a fast app switching from I need to jump between two apps very quickly. There's also an app shortcuts feature which allows me to quickly jump into specific parts of the app, saving me a few taps. In terms of customizability, while it isn't as comprehensive as OxygenOS on the OnePlus 3T, it still offers some options that users can play around with. Like I can customize the quick settings, or I can activate something called the System UI Tuner by long pressing the settings icon, which then allows me to customize the status bar, the Do Not Disturb mode, and activate more granular notification controls. Or I can set the double press to launch the camera, or lift the phone up just to check for new notifications. As of now, I can still say that software is a huge advantage that you get with the Nexus 6, even on a phone that's 2 years old. The user interface is still smooth, and overall the experience is still really great. However, the catch is that I'm not really sure that the Nexus 6 is gonna get the next big version of Android. With Android Nougat, the support for Nexus 5 was dropped, so there is a good chance that the same will happen later this year for the Nexus 6. There are already signs that this will be happening. It took Google a month longer to push the update for 7.1.1 out for the Nexus 6 compared to the newer Nexus devices. This is a 32-bit phone after all, so I fully expect support to be dropped later this year, but of course I would be happy to be proven wrong. The silver lining would be the blooming developer support that the Nexus series has, and how easily tweakable they are. It would take a bit more work, but it would keep the device on the latest version of Android for a bit longer. Back in early 2015, when I reviewed the Nexus 6, I concluded by saying that the Nexus 6 is a difficult phone to love. Despite its capabilities, it was priced too high to be a viable option for most people. Fast forward to early 2017, the Nexus 6 has gone down dramatically in price, but still offers some really compelling features over newer devices. If you can live with some of its drawbacks and just want a budget Android device that still provides a great user experience, the Nexus 6 is still a pretty damn good phone. On a more personal note, putting the capabilities of the phone aside, the Nexus 6 bids farewell to two important names in the Android ecosystem, Motorola and the Nexus brand. Motorola has been sold off to Lenovo and now lives on only in name. With the Pixel lineup picking up where the Nexus left off last year, I'm not exactly sure we'll ever see another new Nexus again. A lot can happen in 2 years, and the Nexus 6 is perhaps the best reminder of that. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give me a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Thank you guys, and see you on the next one.